So in this invention number 2 in C minor, BWV 773 by J.S. Bach, we have use of the half step within the subject, the opening 2 bars, and the placement of those half steps, primarily at the end of the beat, linking into the start of the next beat, creates for me a kind of musical engine into which we can tap as the player for added momentum and steam and thrust and propulsion and torque and excitement in the playing. Those half steps, let me show them to you in this opening subject. You have a half step there in those first 3 notes, C, B natural, C. You have another one there, half step, G to A flat. At the end of the second beat, into the third beat. There's that half step from C to B natural again, at the end of the fourth beat, going into the first beat of measure 2. There it is again, B natural to C, at the end of the second beat, going into the start of the third beat, which is basically just closing that subject of those opening 2 bars. Those half steps, to me, are like musical pressure points. I used to take a form of Korean martial arts many years ago, and we learned about some of the pressure points. I remember there was one here, there's one in here too, I think, the forearm, and then sort of in your armpit area, and then like up here by your neck. Many, many pressure points in the body. And boy, when the instructor demonstrated it on you, you felt the pain. And these are good kinds of musical pressure points, these half steps. And I have played this piece, I've been playing it for many years, and it was only more recently that I came to hear some new levels in the musical structure. And this is the joy of spending years and years with a piece of music, working on it for years, and then taking even more years away from it, and then coming back to revisit it. And you just find new details. And this is one of those details. Let me play for you just those notes as they appear throughout the piece, as well the other notes, which are primarily also at the end of a beat, linking into the beginning of the next beat. They're not all half steps, but what I'm going to play for you are the main notes that I hear. This is something that I've been trying to do more regularly. I find it very curious. It's very enjoyable. It's exciting to my ears, and it helps me listen on new levels. I'm always listening to multiple things at the piano, not just when the subject comes in the alto and then the bass, but creating foreground and background through the music, what I want the listener to hear most, and what's more in the background, and then sort of changing the spotlight and putting it onto different parts, not just literally where the subject is, but interesting little intervallic contours and surprising moments and things along the way. And so, to this end, I have been having fun with some of the more easy pieces. I have not yet been able to crack the code, as it were, doing this with some of the more complicated fugues. But in some of the little preludes, as you saw recently, and these inventions, sinfonias a little bit perhaps, I'm finding that I'm enjoying picking out a few notes from the texture that still resemble the piece as a whole. And I'm trying to use those bare bone notes, shall we call them, as a kind of grip. You know, when you're trying to open a spaghetti jar and maybe you're just really having a hard time, and you get those rubber grip things. We used to have them in our house. And you use that, and all of a sudden you can turn the lid, right? if I do this to the piece and just take out some of the notes that seem to be clinging to my ear as though my ear is a tree, and some of these notes more than others are like moss growing on the tree, it's very enticing to further go down that path. And I do like to go down the path less trodden. This is for sure. And Bach was a nonconformist. And that is the other thing about this piece. The fact that he decided to make this little intermediate level piece, just a 2-part invention, not even a 3-part sinfonia, that he chose to turn this intermediate piece into a canon is like the way this piece makes me think about Bach and about music and life in general is very compelling. I haven't had this experience from any of the other inventions that I can recall. Glenn Gould was always talking about Bach the nonconformist and how Bach was forever writing fugues, wrote a lot of canons as well. Exploration throughout his long life of polyphonic music and the contrapuntal style, especially in his late years. This piece is not from his late years, but his late years saw works like Art of Fugue, a musical offering, and the Goldberg variations too. And these are very dense, complicated works consisting of canons and fugues. And again, to quote Glenn Gould in one of his TV programs, he was saying, basically, fugues were out and minuets were in. At that time, in the 1740s, Bach died in 1750. Fugues were not trendy. In fact, to make a comparison that we can relate to, if Bach, during those late years, was a YouTuber, his videos would be doing very poorly. Because that's not what people were looking for. That's not what they were clicking on. Fugues in the 1740s? No, we don't want to hear those. Those are old-fashioned. So we get a canon, even in these earlier, easier pieces. And it's just canons and fugues, they make me think. I think this is partly why I love Bach's music so much, is that it makes me think about non-musical things. This is not music where one hand has a melody and the other hand has an accompaniment. Homophonic music. And the development of a melody as being almost like property, or like the representation of the ego manifested in sound. These are the ideas. I read a lot into the music. I don't have philosophical training, political science knowledge. It's non-existent. I have been watching, and I do have many books. I try to read and learn about philosophy, and I think if my YouTube homepage were to come up right now, it would show some more of Michel Foucault debating with Noam Chomsky, this kind of thing. And the music is... it's very equitable. It's very fair, and all the parts get equal spotlight. And the contour of this music as well. I got lots I want to say, but this is where the music takes my head. And it's something that I want to get back into with my videos. I moved recently, and that was rather tumultuous. And I have been recently trying to try to be a quote-unquote good piano teacher and share fingerings and pedalings here and there, and how to take things apart, hands separately, and use your metronome and count out loud, and things to listen for. But at the end of the day, that is not what matters most to me. I want to try to use this music not only to move a person through the performance in a deep way, because the music moves me in a very deep way, and maybe someone will laugh at my performance. Maybe someone will, in fact, be moved by it. That I have no control over. But it is my goal to move someone very deeply and profoundly through this music, as well to create and to encourage a kind of playfulness with the whole approach to playing, one that is not taking for granted the value of technique and musical structure, but also not ignoring the psychic side of piano playing, which is something Joseph Hoffman talked about, the two sides of piano playing, the concrete side, which is the technical side, and the psychic side, or the very subtle side of piano playing. And that psychic side is incredibly hard to teach. It's hard to gain, even if you're not teaching. Just as a player, it's hard to develop the psychic side of playing the piano, because this is the side that is enriched by our own experiences. We all have different personality traits. And those traits, I think, and apparently Joseph Hoffman thought so, so I'm in good company. He thought that our own individual and personal traits of our personality and our character should indeed come through in the performance, alongside the rigorous training and having the good technique. And so all of these things are at play in my mind, and Bach, the nonconformist, writing fugues when minuets were in, these things are in my mind. So I keep that there. That is playing in the background as we now go into these half step, these little musical engines, because of their placement at the end of a beat going into the next beat. You'll see the sheet music, I've circled little two notes here and there throughout the piece, again linking the end of a beat into the start of the next beat. And these are just notes that, to me, if I whittle the whole piece, and however many notes there are in total, if I just whittle it down to a few, it would be these. And these notes, when played on their own, to me, still resemble the piece as a whole. And I find that very curious and exciting. So let me play those for you. It's the C minor invention, number 2. Isn't it not? Is it not? Absolutely incredible the way this music lends itself to being taken apart, squished down like a juicer, just get the main juice, not the pulp, not the seeds and everything, the peel and everything of the orange, just the juice. There it is. And it still resembles the piece. And I'm trying, when I play the piece with all of the notes back intact, and I'll link that performance in the video description, though I think that one is a little bit old. So if I were to play it today, I might take it a little bit different approach perhaps. But these places in the piece are where I'm trying to kind of, like as I say, a pressure point. I'm trying to push into the key a little bit more deeply and push out of it too, with more pressure from the finger and the arm and the back to get a little bit more propulsion. One of the things about this piece, again, it makes me think of so many different things. And I have here written on the top of my page from about 9 years ago when I first started learning this piece, I have Gothic, as in a Gothic cathedral from the 1100s, with the very pointed archways, right? The Gothic style. That, because I had a book about architecture, and it was showing the different kinds of doorways and And I was fascinated by this. And so I was applying that to each of the inventions. And this number 2, with those half steps, which you just heard, as well contrasted by the wide intervals of like the minor sixth, which is just outlining a second inversion C minor triad in measure 1, and the diminished seventh at the beginning of measure 2, B natural to A flat, which is outlining a diminished seventh chord. Those wide intervals offset those delicious half-step pressure point motor engine points to create a visual in my mind of something that resembles the Gothic cathedral, very pointed, as opposed to the invention number 1, which moves very much along in stepwise fashion, and there aren't a whole lot of really big leaps. At least, well, there are some, but they don't seem to stand out to my ears anyway as shockingly as in number 2. And so for that matter, I had applied the Romanesque, more rounded doorway church style to invention number 1 years ago when I was exploring that tangent. But another tangent that more recently this piece made me think of what my ears are trying to do in it, and it relates to a painting by René Serra, who was a French artist. He lived from 1895 to 1992, and I just know one painting of his. I don't know what other artwork he did. He did come to Canada and was doing some kind of design work, architectural design, I believe, for the Timothy Eaton department store, which was Canada's main department store during the mid of the 20th century. Even when I was little, I can remember we would go to Eaton's. They had nice things. Glenn Gould recorded in Eaton's auditorium. But René Serra had made a painting which he gave to the Center for Culture and Technology, which was Marshall McLuhan's department at the University of Toronto. And that painting was called Pied Piper's All. And what is it? It reflects television as a one-eyed dance of seduction and perturbation. When I look at that painting, my eyes are doing what my ears are doing when I play Bach. I look at that painting and it invites my eyes to go all over the place. There is no perspective, right, where like a focal point or a horizon. It's very mosaic-like, absolutely. And Bach's music to me is a mosaic of sound for the ears. I think it's absolutely incredible, as well, as if it weren't enough that we have the magic of those little half steps exactly where they're positioned at the end of the beat to help propel the music forward. But also the changing shape and the contour of the intervals. I have said a number of times, and I'm sure this won't be the last time, that Bach's rhythms are often not extremely interesting or exciting. If I were to clap the rhythm of this first bar, that is basically the rhythm of measure 2 and much of the piece. That is not an interesting rhythm. But the notes that make up that rather simplistic rhythm are anything but. They are going up, they're going down, they're changing in direction of interval, sometimes a wide, sometimes a small interval. And especially when the hands are together, like in measure 21, each going different directions, sometimes in the same direction. And again, it's totally like that painting, but for the ears. And now granted, it's been a while since I've performed any homophonic music like a Mozart sonata. It's not to say that I don't enjoy other composers' music. I really do. I love Rachmaninoff's music. I love Ravel's. In fact, I think I did play Ravel quite well, actually. Though my Beethoven was not so hot. Um, I enjoy those styles, but the other composer's music does not make me think of René Serra's painting. Bach's music does. And this idea of like pointillistic almost listening, or a Jackson Pollock painting, where it may look random, but there is some planning to it, surely, right? And the way that, because the colors coordinate well, and the way it pulls your eye from one side of the canvas to the other and then around, and it's never in moving in very strict lines, and it's very fluid and changing. And this also, this is what this little invention does to me. It just turns my mind on, and I love it. I couldn't really care less about fingering and articulation. That is just not so interesting as all of the other stuff, the stuff that this music makes me think of. My goodness. We also have these psi motives, right? When a note is repeated like that and then it drops down a step, it's a musical sigh. Like if we sigh. And I love how Erwin Bodke, in his book on Bach's keyboard music, refers to the sigh motive. He says, we sigh only when we feel moderately bad. Right? If we think about when we sigh, maybe we're a little bit tired or a little bit frustrated. We're kind of weary. But if we are absolutely distraught or full of rage or experiencing some really intense emotion, we're probably doing more than just sighing. We may be wailing, weeping, crying, screaming, shouting, anything. And so that is an interesting notion too, because the half steps, as I say, seem to indicate a kind of forward-moving, spinning propulsion to the piece. And yet those two-note slurs, according to Bodke, and I would have to agree, suggest moderation, because they're a psi motive, right? And the placement of those is also interesting to me as well, because we get them, we get it in measure 3 and 4 when the piece is still in C minor, but then we also get them in measure 5 and 6 where we've moved to the relative major key, which is E flat major. And then we get them again in the piece, both in major and in minor. So I'm thinking of a lot of things here as well. This piece has tied notes, quarter note with ties on them as well. And I think those tied notes combined with the psi motive help to sort of provide some musical relief to the ear. Because getting back to the fact that this piece is a canon, that is very intense. So let's just quickly explain how this canon is working. We have 2 canons in the piece. The first one goes from measure 1 to measure 10. So there's 10 bars, followed by another 10 bars in measure 11 to measure 20. The piece is 27 bars in total. So the remaining 7 bars, I would say 21 and 22 is just kind of a free material, getting us back to the home key of C minor in 23. And 23 to the end is a little bit like a third canon in that we hear that main theme, this business, in the right hand, and then answered by the left hand 2 bars later at 25, followed by a very confident, perfect cadence in C minor. In that canon number 1, the first 2 bars present the subject, and this is heard in the right hand. And the right hand continues with another 6 bars of material, with those psi motives and whatnot, going into E flat major, and the tied notes. All of this business. And it completes its canonic material at the end of measure 8. The left hand is the answer to canon number 1, and it enters 2 bars after the right hand begins. So it's just like when you were in elementary school and you were singing Three Blind Mice. 3 blind mice, 3 blind mice, see how they run. You get to that point and then the next person has entered, right? So the delay, if you will, they're offset by 2 bars. And the left hand has the exact same note for note material that the right hand did in measure 1 to 8, this time in measure 3 to 10. And so that is what's going on. We start in C minor. We get into E flat major by measure 5. Right? But it's still canonic. And then he gets us... now, I am not a theorist or a composer or analyst, but I'm just using my basic theory knowledge, and I would say we're more or less in the key of G minor when the second canon begins in measure 11. And this time it's the left hand that is kicking things off. So there's 2 bars of the subject, same as what we heard in the beginning, except transposed. And the right hand, 2 bars later, in measure 13, answers the left hand and continues to answer what the left hand will be saying through to the end of that second canon at the end of measure 20. And that second canon really is very much like the first. The subject is the same. It's just the lead-off hand has changed, but the same psi motive, the same trills, the same tied notes, and the same harmonic motion. The canon number 1 began in C minor, and it went to the relative major, which is E flat. Canon 2, I would say, is in G minor, and it too goes to its relative major, which is B flat major, by about measure 15. And then that second canon works its way back to the home key for measure 23 to the end. So that's a little harmonic outline of the things that are going on. So to capitalize, in a nutshell, to capitalize on those half steps, if you like hearing those and your ear feels guided by them, you can do this kind of practice, because it involves overlapping those half steps at a very slow tempo, creating a kind of finger pedal so that we're hearing not individual notes, but rather so indulge a little bit at your piano or your keyboard with those half steps. I find in general half steps in Bach are tremendously expressive, and if you just take some ultra slow practice, hands separately, overlapping like that so you can hear the bleeding of the 2 notes, do a lot of that, and then when you remove that and play it more up to tempo, a fraction of that little gooey caramel between the notes will be retained, and that will help give extra color and texture and shape to the playing. Same thing with the G to A flat. So it's almost sounding like I don't know, some sort of new age spa music, right? And again, the C to B natural at the across the bar line, measure 2. And when it's followed by a wide interval, as it is there, or it's preceded by a wide interval, as it is in the second beat of measure 1, and wherever this appears in the piece, listen for those as well. Like you're with those wide intervals, the diminished seventh in measure 2. Again, finger pedal that. Hear the bleeding. Even play it as a solid interval, a harmonic interval. And use some arm as well, so the tone is more deep and rich. If you're playing on an electric keyboard, depending on how touch responsive your instrument is, you may not be able to achieve any of these. You could even be Horowitz playing on your Casio keyboard and still not be able to achieve color through the sound because of the fact that it's not a touch responsive instrument. So hopefully you do have a touch responsive electric piano, ideally an acoustic piano, and can create some of these colors, but you have to go slowly. And so each of those sections, beginning of Canon 1, the switch to the relative major, the beginning of Canon 2 in G minor, the switch to its relative major, and the return to the home key and the final statement of those two of the subject in both hands, you can use those as good entry points, starting points for in terms of where to change your sound, where to change your touch and tone. I like a little bit of a lighter touch, a little bit of a less intense kind of quality to the sound. When I go into those relative major bits, that's also where we had the psi motive, right? So these places in Canon 1 and in Canon 2, right? So just being mindful of the different sections and using them as springboards to change your touch and sound, to create color, and using these half steps as places like pressure points for your ear to link on to tap into the engine of this delicious little piece, which is just the tip of the iceberg of Bach's contrapuntal oeuvre, which we can enjoy, hopefully, for many centuries to come. I thank you for watching and wish you happy practicing. Stay well, stay safe, and we'll see you again soon for more explorations of Bach's music. Take care. Bye-bye.